Thank you for joining us today. I'm here with Meghan Shahli-Wells. Meghan is Culver City's immediate past mayor and is entering her 4th year as member of the City Council. I first met Meghan at the Los Angeles New Urbanism Film Festival, and based on her comments there, I was intrigued to learn more about her activities on the town council. And for those listeners not familiar with Culver City is part of the Los Angeles sprawl. It's on the western side of Los Angeles, has a really interesting history. Started as a studio town, a movie studio town, and now has a population of some 40,000 people. And as I'd mentioned, it's surrounded by Los Angeles. There's Sony Pictures Entertainment is here now, National Public Radio West is here, as well as NFL Networks. And the Hughes Aircraft Company was here between 1932 and 1985. It's becoming a much more livable city, I think, every year. And I'd like to think that's people like Meghan have been partly responsible for that with her leadership and direction. Because Meghan is well known for her passion for analyzing complex issues and encouraging community engagement, with the ultimate goal of finding solutions that promote a resilient and sustainable city. A little background on Meghan. She was a double major in World Arts and Cultures and French, and she holds 2 bachelor's degrees from UCLA. She's traveled extensively, studying visual anthropology, conducting sociological research, and working as an English-French translator. I'm really excited to learn more about Meghan's travels and how that's influenced her here in Culver City. So without any further ado, Meghan, welcome to the Center for Progressive Urban Politics.
Thanks for having me.
Well, great. Meghan, I'm really curious. What things or what facets, what types of design make a city more livable, and why should that be important for the citizens of Culver City, Los Angeles County, and frankly, the country as a whole?
Well, where do I begin? First, before I was on the city council, I was involved in my son's school and in neighborhood activism. And there were a couple things happening that were completely had to do with public policy, although I didn't really recognize it at the time. One was a program called Safe Routes to School. It's a program to make it easier for kids to walk, bike, scooter to school rather than being trapped in metal boxes called cars.
Okay.
And I got involved. The city got a grant from the LA Department of Public Health because of the increasing obesity epidemic. And what we found was that, we've created cities that promote obesity.
Because we just don't, one, have places to recreate, or we simply don't allow people to recreate or give them...
We have streets that are friendly for cars and not for people. And so there's a lot to do to reverse that trend, which is, in a nutshell, killing us. Killing us through pollution, killing us through lack of physical activity, and also kind of, it drains your soul to be in a traffic situation. It makes people unhappy, and it starts the day off in exactly the wrong way.
I commuted over here this morning. I was on the 10. It should have been a 20 without traffic or lots of traffic. It would have been 21 minutes. It was almost an hour.
Yeah. So that's kind of soul crushing, and it's not good by any standard if you're thinking of health or climate change or whatever. So, we had a simple task that was to get kids and their parents to let them get out of cars and allow them to walk and bike to school in a safe way. So we started that in our neighborhood with my son's school, and it's now happening throughout the entire school district. It's still very much a work in progress. There's still big
Are-
design barriers to allowing people to enjoy their city. We're a city of 5 miles squared, so we have the opportunity and the accessibility to ensure that every kid could get to school without using a car. So that's part of my job. So I was involved in that again before I was on the city council, and I was also involved in development issues and making sure that there was some sort of respect between existing residences and then new buildings coming in, and how do you make for a good quality of life throughout the city. And little by little, through being involved in my community, I kind of got sucked in
You became a leader.
The kind of in a very unexpected way. And it's funny because I used to be a translator when I lived in France, and I found that I was learning the language of City Hall, and became interested in translating it for other neighborhoods, and started a small group that was called the Neighborhood Action Network, because we wanted to help other neighbors when they found that something was happening in their city that they didn't agree with, and kind of helping give them the tools to who do you call at City Hall? How early do you have to talk to them? Who's in charge? Who are the movers and the shakers?
These are very basic but very important tools, very important things to teach people. Myself, as an activist, it really wasn't until someone drugged me down to an assemblyman's office and showed me how, yes, you can go and have this conversation with them, and yes, what you say is important as a citizen.
Well, and the other part of that is that, if you don't stand up and say that, your voice will absolutely not be heard, because democracy is participatory, and
not a spectator sport.
And if you do not participate, you are not represented.
So in a way, you're saying the one thing to really guarantee something is not to say that's for sure. They may listen to you, they may not, but at least there's a chance that something.
If you speak up, and especially in a small city, if you speak up in a small city, your voice is actually quite powerful. Part of the problem, and this is, we're kind of talking about the political process here, unfortunately not enough people vote. So if you do vote, your vote counts, 20-fold.
It's far greater weighted than if the majority of the people were voting.
Yeah. Great.
Well, getting back into livability, sustainability, what makes a city livable?
Trees. Definitely trees. Sidewalks where you can walk. I would say slow car speeds.
Okay. We seem to have trouble in Los Angeles, where I live, with that. All the new development, even though they might be putting a bike lane in, there's really there are councilmen on the city and the county level that won't even say the words road diet. They don't seem to feel that it's important to slow things down. When hasn't it been demonstrated that even small local businesses do much better when you slow the traffic down?
Absolutely. And it's slow going. I mean, we know that in the United States we have a tragic underfunding of infrastructure. And tragic, that word is not I'm not saying that to exaggerate. It really is causing deaths.
And tragic might be a good term, because there are significant consequences to that lack of funding we're feeling now, and we're going to feel well into the future.
Oh, yeah.
And future generations.
Well, it
will
also,
impact.
I mean, financially speaking, if you don't invest in your infrastructure in the beginning stages of decrepitude, it gets more and more expensive to repair. So if you put it off, and we went through the Great Recession, it's been hard. It has not been easy. But the more you put it off, the not only do you live with bad roads and bike lanes, et cetera, for a longer time, but it's much more expensive to repair. So putting it off is really not a good thing. The great thing about bike infrastructure, though, is you get more bang for your buck, because the weight of the bikes is a lot less than huge cars and trucks, and that infrastructure lasts a lot longer. So it pays more dividends when you do that type of infrastructure. But it's, as you mentioned earlier, it's hard to get people to stop thinking about maximum throughput of vehicles as the goal of every road in the city. My family and I traveled to New York and Montreal this summer, and as soon as we got to New York, we saw stickers and PSAs talking about Vision Zero. And I'm incredibly excited about Vision Zero. It's a movement that says that no pedestrian or bicycle fatality is acceptable. And therefore, we must design our streets to ensure that even if there is an accident, people won't die because of it. And there's
speed plays a big role in that.
It is the central tenet of Vision Zero. Is I don't know if you've seen this graphic before, but it has if there's an accident and then it goes through the different speeds. If it's 45 miles per hour, guaranteed dead. If it's 35 miles per hour, you have 2/3 of a chance of dying. 25 miles per hour, you will survive. You might be hurt, but you'll still survive. So Vision Zero, at least in New York City, is you cannot, in this city, you can't go more than 25 miles per hour, which, given traffic, it's probably the case anyway. I'd love to see that here in Culver City. Culver City is it's a great town. It's a livable town. But it's also a town that people drive through to get somewhere else.
Correct. So they're trying to get to Santa Monica, or they're trying to get to downtown Los Angeles.
Exactly, and they're just coming through. So you know what? 25 miles per hour is fine with that cut through. If you don't want to cut through my town, all the better.
Stay on the 10.
Stay on the 10. Stay on Venice Boulevard. I don't care. Just let's preserve what we have. But that, politically, is very hard because people like the convenience. I mean, people are used to, obviously, the status quo, and they want to be able to go as fast as they want, whenever they want, and not be bothered by, worrying about, cyclists or anything else. And so it's not something that it's not enough to just have the vision and say, let's do this. You need political capital, you need activism, you need support.
What are the political arguments that you would use on your peers on the council or other civic leaders or other business leaders in the city of Culver City? How do you express your, what you want to do with the zero vision concept?
Well, when I was mayor last year, I set the goal to make Culver City the best city in which to raise children in the United States. And under that umbrella, you can put a lot of things. So focusing on kids is, in my mind, a good entry point to have this conversation. And again, Safe Routes to School, it's all about that type of initiative, focusing on kids. And once you focus on kids, everybody gets the benefits. I'm a representative on the Energy and Environment Committee of SCAG.
The Southern California
Association of Governments. It's the largest metropolitan planning organization in the United States. It's huge, and they do planning. Right now they're doing a major planning process. It's called I'm sorry, it's the world of acronyms. RTP, SCS, it's the Regional Transportation Planning and Sustainable Communities. S is the last S I'm not remembering. Should be some sort of a plan or something, but anyway, they're getting all the projections about demographics and using all the data we do know about what our populations are doing today. The big conversation about public transportation is you've got the baby boomers on the one hand that are aging, and their transportation needs will be changing and are changing. And then on the other hand, you have the millennials who are making different transportation choices. There's a survey that says that millennials would rather have a smartphone than a car. And as
isn't
we're
that really
seeing,
showing up in the percent of millennials applying for driver's licenses and things like that?
it's exactly based on that. Yes, you're completely correct. And then we'll see whether once they start having babies and whatnot, will that continue to be the case, or will they still be car averse? I kind of see it, and I'm hoping it'll be the latter. I kind of see it like music. We had the LPs, we had the CDs, and then we realized having the object itself, we didn't need to own the object. We just needed to have access. And hopefully transportation will be like that as well. It's all about, if you think of Uber or, driverless cars, it's all about having it in a very convenient and cheap way when and where you need it, and then not having to park it, not having to pay insurance, not having, think of the real estate, think of the real estate that is just taken up by cars that we could be using for parks and so many other wonderful public amenities. Cars, I'm hoping, will be very has-been for my children, right? Because, when I lived in Paris, it made no sense whatsoever to have a car. Why would you have that financial burden for something you would never want to use because there's so much traffic anyway? So we were in Paris when they introduced bike share, when they put in protected bike. They were shared bus, bike, taxi lanes that were fantastic. And then of course the metro and the bus system. What I loved about Paris was, and in many other cities for that matter, you don't have to be a quote-unquote transit rider in order to take the bus. You're just a person who sees a bus and says, hey, it'll be shorter if I hop on that bus. It's more, whereas here there's some sort of a social stigma, and there's some like communication barriers, I think, to actually taking the bus. Where's the map? Where are the stops? Right? You almost have to be a professional bus rider to ride the bus. So, there's a lot we need to change, and boy, then you get into the whole density thing, which is fraught. But anyway, I know you mentioned, my travels and whatnot, and I definitely living in Paris for 9 years has changed my view of my hometown and some of the solutions we can pursue.
But I think it's important, you had mentioned that Paris developed the bike lanes. They developed, there seems to be this, when I talk to people about Europe, it's like, oh, they were always there. Like in the
No.
Netherlands, the bike lanes were always there.
No.
But that's not true, is it?
It was within the last, 12 years, even less, within the last decade. And it was a huge political battle. Oh my goodness.
Really?
They kind of railroaded it. The mayor at the time, Bertrand Delanoë, had the ire of every car owner and even taxi owner. Probably that's why the taxis can share that bus lane. It was a huge political lift. He rammed it through, and it's been absolutely fantastic. Now, what they have that we don't have, a couple of things. One, the density, and two, their metro had just celebrated their 100th anniversary, so they had unlike LA that got rid of their metro,
Right.
That could have been us too, right? We missed that one, but we're slowly getting back to it. So they have a transportation infrastructure that could support the alternatives. We're still building that. But what we have that they don't have is weather that is the envy of, and we don't have a lot of hills, depending on your neighborhood. If you look at LA as a whole, it is so, we've got so much capacity and road capacity. But, and the political will is coming little by little. But I don't know, maybe this sounds silly, but like when I was listening to all these talks about the two generations, the millennials and the baby boomers, these are the huge generations. I'm a Gen X, and I feel like, this is my role, is to bring the two together and find a solution that brings us into, a healthy and enjoyable future. Because even the people who complain about bikes, oh, those cyclists, they don't know how to ride, da, 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 da. Do they really want another car on the road? I don't think so. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I think that we're doing them a favor by not choosing to be in our cars, and we just have to have our planning really express that, and we can. And we, with the cap and trade program through the state of California, we're starting to see some funding for these. We're starting to see a little bit of affordable housing, but really not enough at all. One of our battles in Southern California is to not let all of the money go up to the north, which it usually does. So that's a big battle. But, I think it's like we have the answers. We just have to, at a certain point, we just have to go for it and let the fallout be what it is. We know this is the right thing, and for so many different reasons.
Even I'm in Los Angeles, I'm actually in District 1 in the northeast area of Los Angeles, and we're having a huge fight over the northeast Figueroa. And we call it Northeast Northeast Los Angeles. And the city councilman completely diverged from the city plan and shot down the bike lanes and proposed slanted parking for automobiles along the way. I was just aghast.
So that passed?
It's a fight right now. The problem with Los Angeles is they seem to defer to the local councilman for his area. And his name is Gil Cedillo. He's earned the nickname Roadkill Gil. And we continue to have pedestrian deaths along that corridor with really, relative to the rest of Los Angeles, it's a pretty great frequency. So again, it's a challenge. And in Los Angeles, there are administrative challenges to letting your kid walk to school.
Yeah.
So there's all these hurdles to overcome. So it's really refreshing to find a civic leader like yourself who's prepared to take on these challenges. It's taking longer than I'd like, but it's
there's a culture change. I mean, think of grass lawns. We're going through a culture change. Unfortunately, it took, an historic drought to get us there, but little by little, we're realizing that, Kentucky grass is not
a good idea
the
for
solution.
a semi-arid environment.
Right, and also waking up to the fact that what we do have naturally here is much more beautiful and much more beneficial. So I guess I'm fairly optimistic because I know that, I don't take that kind of guilt-laden approach that, do this because it's good for you. Do this because it's good for the environment, even though it hurts, Actually, when we have less cars, when we have more pedestrians, when we have more bikes, and when we have more open space, everybody benefits. I mean, it's just a more pleasant living experience, and it's good for you, and it's good for the environment, and you lose those pounds, and on and on and on. It just takes a while to change the culture, and that's why I'm grateful to be in a small town, because we can do these things, we can achieve them. LA is what is it, the second largest city in the country? That's a hard nut to crack,
It is. And then when you look at the county itself and the unincorporated areas,
it's
that
huge.
fall under it.
It's huge. So I'm grateful that I've talked to folks from UCLA, from Antioch. Let Culver City be your laboratory, because we're a great size to do that in, and we've got Ballona Creek. I mean, we've got a lot going for us, and I think overall we have a population that's ready for this type of change.
Great. So what kind of bicycle do you ride?
I have a Jamis commuter that I bought at my local bike shop, Chubby's Cruisers.
Okay.
They're really, Nicole, the owner, lives in Culver City, and so they help us out with a lot of our events and stuff. They've been a great local business, and so I like to give them my business too.
Great. Recently Pope Francis presented the concept that the health of our natural environment is dictated by the shape and quality of our human communities. He stated both our social connections and physical places we inhabit. So, do you think the Pope could be a new urbanist? Do you think that that's an important link for people to make? The beauty in the things you make around you, and beauty in the environment. Are these things important? Are they achievable?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's great that he's come out with that. I'm agnostic, but I think the more voices that share this vision in a variety of ways is a really positive step forward. And it's a very poetic sentiment, and I think he's absolutely right. And another thing that I found in my work as a council member and as mayor and as a translator is not only people respond differently to different messages, and you can accomplish the same goal, but in the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned bike infrastructure being good for business. When I'm talking to people who are more concerned about the economy than the environment, it's a truthful and effective argument. If I'm talking to seniors at the senior center, I will talk about their safety, being able to cross the street. If I talk to, kids, I'll be talking about how fun it is to be able to walk to school with your friends. And, the quote you just read is another, sincere, truthful message. And it's really important to hear his voice in this larger conversation. And, when I talk about you have to change culture, that's what I'm talking about. That's how you get it, is with, it can't just be Bill McKibben, whom I love, with 350.org, because not everybody's going to be receptive to that. But his voice and his important work, along with the popes and along with, the president and, a lot of people in between and business members, we finally get this big picture that, and you kind of have to imagine something in order to be able to move toward it.
Could you, along those lines, could you paint, let's just say here in Culver City, because we won't put Los Angeles County and Los Angeles into the mix, but can you paint a picture of a Culver City, let's say in 2030, that has, as of today, started to adopt some of the precepts of new urbanism, making things more walkable, making things, city, focusing on the livability and the safety and the health and the welfare, and designing a city to promote that in its citizens? What would a Culver City like that look like?
It would be a Culver City where you never again see a parking lot in front of a store. If you have a parking lot, it is below, it is above, it is behind, but it's not the first approach. Those blacktops, which, in terms of climate change are, exactly the wrong model, but they're also ugly. They're also, I was at a conference where they described the difficulties of for pedestrians to get from point A to point B, and sometimes humans carve their own little pathways between these barriers that developers have put up.
Okay.
They call them desire lines. I love it. Desire lines. And we have some, you can see them on Jefferson Boulevard. There's this, Target and Ross and Bed Bath & Beyond, and, and you can hardly approach it as a pedestrian, and it's right against a residential neighborhood. So you have a desire line that goes through a hedge, and into the shopping center. And there's an actual, because there were like two different projects and they're divided by a wall, and my family and I and a bunch of other people have to hop the fence to get from one parking lot to the other, because why would you drive from one to the other?
Right.
It makes no sense whatsoever. So I would like to see these desire lines, become good planning. I would like to, and also, it's interesting because you can take some models from the past and improve on them for a better future, and having more shopping centered around in your own neighborhood. A little place where you can get milk, you can get peanut butter or whatever right in your neighborhood, so you don't have to drive to the store. We have a farmer's market that's been fantastic. I would love to see more of those opportunities throughout our 5 square miles. And of course, you also want a city that is financially viable. And so you want the businesses, the homegrown businesses, to thrive, and you want your population to use those businesses.
because it gets down to the velocity of money, that local exchange and dynamic of money.
There have been studies that locally owned local businesses keep more money in the community. I mean, it sounds logical, and it is, right? Yeah. If you go to, transnational corporation, most of your money leaves your community. But if you, like I do, go to my local bike shop and, the owner lives in my community, she's spending her dollars here too. She's investing them here. She happens to hire most of the high school students that are at Culver High. And and so it kind of has a multiplier effect. So I love supporting, and I'd like to celebrate more our local businesses. And especially the locally owned local businesses, but having those, and right now, like our zoning no longer allows these little businesses in the heart of communities.
That's another problem. Zoning always seems to be an issue where you isolate, because weren't studies done decades ago where they've shown that if you have a community with very active sidewalks, morning and night, it's kind of a mix. I don't want to use the term mixed use because I think that's been bastardized, but well, you can have a mix of people working and living in a community. It's much safer and
and I think the number one reason why people don't want those today is because of cars. Isn't it ironic? It all comes down to parking. It all comes down to traffic, and
so
that
perhaps as these millennials move and begin to take up positions of responsibility in the community, they'll look at the zoning and go, why do we have this zoning? Well, no one here owns a car. It's just, it'll go away. Yeah. It's going to take a while to get there, but at least we're working on it. And to get back to one of our earlier conversations about, participation, it's very much about getting people to be part of this conversation and to actually serve as electeds. You kind of think of politicians as them, but it could really be us. It just as you've demonstrated.
There is.
How long did it take you to go from neighborhood activist to city council? How long did that?
Let's see. I moved here from Paris in, I think it was the end of 2008. I grew up here, and then I lived abroad about 15 years and came back. I started getting involved, and by 2010, I ran for city council, which was totally unexpected. I lost by 32 votes, so every vote does count, really. I know for a fact. And we had just grown so much momentum just in the simple act of campaigning that I felt like, okay, I'm just not going to stop campaigning. I'll just keep going. And in 2012, I was elected, and there were 4 seats up, and I came in second from the top. So from being in Paris to coming onto the city council was a really good.
Very much the model in that, as an activist, I had taught people, run and fail, run again, because you learn so much in that process. I mean, it takes a lot within the community and that group of activists to learn how to organize a district or a census tract or a precinct. And a lot of skills have to be learned in that, but people do get them and they try. Well, Meghan, I just want to say, thanks so much for taking time to meet with me today, discuss your role in moving your city forward in a more progressive light. Really anxious to see how things progress for you. Is there anything we haven't covered that you think might be important for my listeners to
You asked about what makes a good community, and I forgot one really key ingredient, good food.
Good food. Okay. Well, super. Again, Meghan, I just want to say thanks so much for meeting with me today, sharing your thoughts on what good, strong elected leaders should be and pursuing in their agendas, and look forward to checking in with you in the future.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much.